If you don't have the right perspective, you can get lost.
Leaders fail to surround themselves with the right mix of people and perspectives and talent, which then leads to failure.
Hello and good day. Welcome to another episode of The Consultant and the Coach. Nothing's more hard than business, and that's why my buddy Josh, who's the consultant, I'm the coach, we're Christians, good friends, running buddies, book nerds, and we produce this podcast to help you out as the business leader of your business. And I think one of the hardest things in business is to maintain perspective. If we lose perspective, it can literally seem like we are in the middle of a tornado in our business and we're like, which way is up, which way is down, this just happened, this just happened. Let's help our listeners and shed a little bit of light.
Yeah. I mean, let's, straight to the point. I think the CEO job, or even most executive jobs that I consult with, it's a lonely seat.
It is.
You're getting advice all the time, or you're getting asked for decisions all the time, which is your job. That's fine. The hard part is, it's no one else has the information you have in that role, and so it becomes very lonely. And then leaders fail to surround themselves with the right mix of people and perspectives and talent, right, which then leads to failure.
And a lot of times I've seen what brings companies down, and it isn't what you think it would be. It tends to be some little things that then lead to burnout, and then bam, something happens. Yesterday, I had my offsite leader in the Philippines contact me, and she was like, Eric, I need some containment and encouragement in this one area. And she was just at wit's end. And for her, it literally was something as simple as a 10-minute conversation. She's like, oh, hey, thanks, Eric. I'm better now. It wasn't a big deal. But for her, when leaders, and I don't care how big or small you are, you become deregulated, it doesn't take too much to lose perspective, and then we need to get back into perspective. And you have a proverb that says this. So what's the proverb?
I was going to say Proverbs. Let's get to our scripture. Proverbs 13:20. Whoever walks with the wise will become wise, but a companion of fools will suffer harm. And I think we've seen this in several podcasts and a couple of the books we've done, but this importance of surrounding ourselves with people is really the key to wisdom, therefore enabling maintaining perspective, which is what we're talking about today. So it's,
whoever walks with the wise will become wise. And I find it fascinating. I work with so many amazing business leaders, but then I'll dial into, tell me about your life team. Tell me about your closest comrades. And they're like, well, I have one. You have one?
Yeah.
Can you imagine going into Army with two people? You would get your butt kicked. I don't care how great of Navy SEALs you are, unless you have some big weapon behind you. You need a team to go into battle. And so but when I see wise people walking with wise, you're going to win. But a companion, back to Proverbs 13, a companion of fools will suffer harm. So leadership's a lonely seat. So where do we start? As we're talking to leaders, you're running your company, you're leading your company. What happens? You're lonely. And when I'm talking lonely, I'm talking leadership lonely is what we're talking about.
And maybe socially lonely too.
Could be that
because sometimes CEOs are so busy running their businesses, they're also that. But this is about perspective. It's about decision making, right? It's about communication, and so it's this generally this importance to address this problem. And obviously, it's really easy to get I think tunnel vision, right? It's sort of like when you drive down the street and you can't see that back right corner, cross over your shoulder, right? Because it's the blind spot, right? There's all these things in business analogies we can use that can be the end of you, right? You can cause a wreck, go out of business, fail as a leader, lose your job, whatever that might be. So, what do you see from a coaching perspective?
From a coaching perspective, it's not having a large enough life team. Hands down.
Yeah, sure.
When one doesn't have a large enough life team, it causes perspective to get lost. So, for example, I do a lot of backpacking, and we're in the Pacific Northwest, and a couple years ago, I'm getting old when I say a couple years, because this trip literally was 25 years ago. This trip was literally 25 years ago.
You're getting old and make me feel old.
I'm hiking across the Olympic Peninsula from north to south. I had my map and I knew where I was going to go. We're going to cross this pass on the Olympic Peninsula. Year was 1999, and we had to go over this pass, and I lost the trail. And I could not find the trail. Well, why? Well, what had happened that year, 1999, was one of the last El Nino years, which means we get more rain and precipitation, and the snowpack was out of this world. We took a turn at what we thought was a river. It turned out it was just a creek, but because there was so much snow melt, we thought it was a river.
Yeah.
We got off.
Because there was a river on the map.
It was a river on the map, and we did it because it was flowing like a river. It was just an overflowing creek is all that it was. We got lost. If you don't have the right perspective, you can get lost. And what happened was, because of that, we were safe, but we actually never were able to finish the trip. We had to turn around and go back out the north side because we lost perspective.
Sure.
So leaders, when we don't have proper perspective, and leaders need a large enough life team to help with perspective.
And so we have a whole episode out there on life teams. We don't have to go redo that one, but if you want to hear more. But tell me, when you're saying life team, can you define that a little bit more?
Yeah, when I say life team, I am talking about people outside of your business. I mean, you need to have consultants inside your business, but also outside your business. They'll help you see if they're true friends. They'll say, hey, Josh, yeah, you're right. What I see you going through right now, that's really, really hard. I can see how that'd be exhausting. However, everything else you've told me about being steadfast, hey, you're steadfast, man. You're putting in the work. Yeah, I know you've been complaining about not wanting to get in shape. You just told me you went out for another run this morning. You are in shape. Let me just encourage you, stay in the same direction. Or likewise, if they truly know you and you're like, hey, Eric, I'm fine. I'm like, well, based on your life actions, it doesn't seem like it from what you've told me about your career goals. That's what it means to have a life team. And we need to have several of these people in our life, depending on what area.
Sure. And I think the book you know better than I do from Dr. Townsend is called People Fuel, right? So it talks about nutrients and the importance of all those different nutrients in each person's life, and then thinking about where in your life you're getting those nutrients and not expecting them from, your spouse or your dog. Right.
Absolutely. Now, also, in terms of maintaining perspective, no two people are the same people. So if you ask me, Eric, tell me about your life team, I actually have about 12 people on my life team. None of the 12 are the exact same. So, for example, on my life team, some people are better at containment. These are the people I literally just call vent, drop way too many 4-letter words to. But I just need them to listen to me. I don't necessarily need consulting. I have other friends, they're great with finances. I have other friends, they're highly empathetic because I need someone to just hear me and say, yeah, that would tick me off too. So when we create our life team, what we need are a lot of people who are skilled in different areas. I mean, the only one who was great at all things was Jesus. But
yeah. So tell me, think through. So I'm hearing a few different terms. I'm trying to follow you. There's like a formal life team that you meet with regularly. Sounds like a bigger circle of, say, little L life team that you're sort of leaning on people for certain things.
I would
as
perhaps
needed.
Life team consultants. I have other people literally around the country that I'm like, I'm going to talk to so-and-so about this, or I'm going to talk to so-and-so about this.
And then in my mind, I think there's also even a bigger circle, what I would call the support team, right? So think if you're a CEO or an executive, I think, don't be afraid to think about yourself as an NFL quarterback.
Correct.
Right? I mean, you need the life team, sort of like your offensive line, right? You need the bigger support group, which is your offensive coordinator, it's your receivers, right? And then there's your support team in my mind is your massage therapist, your cook, your all these things like that are helping you stay in shape from a physical and a mental perspective.
Absolutely. Right? And for me, as a believing Christian, I would throw my church in there as well too, because even though I'm not bringing business problems to our home group at church, it also helps center me in a very spiritual way. Like, okay, just remind me, not everything is about business. It's about the kingdom of God. Yeah. And so when setting up a life team and just maintaining perspective, we need to have all components in place.
And I think there's also some very tactical ones there, that we've talked about, I think, I'm just looking at my list, but, there is having an attorney.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Who are you getting? Like that's not going to necessarily give you emotional nutrients, but you need to know who you're going to call, right? So that's considered part of the team. There's also, don't be afraid to have an executive coach, and then even separately from that, a therapist or a counselor who you can call on. I'm a big fan of regular massages, so I have someone I go to just like get my body right when it's getting messed up. And then I think there's also things for, your family. How are you surrounding yourself with family resources too?
So in terms of maintaining perspective, one of the biggest things that I see from an executive coach is a huge, huge danger. It can also be a blessing, but it's a huge danger, is tunnel vision. And so tunnel vision is a
for
blessing.
The CEO or as the executive coach?
No, from the CEO.
You see the CEO.
When I see the CEO with such high degree of tunnel vision. Now, on one side, it's great because you are like a sniper, and you're going to kill whatever you're shooting at with tunnel vision. But there's a danger. From a consulting standpoint, what is that danger with tunnel vision?
Yeah, I mean, you missed the shifts, and we talked about it last time, right? We talked about market shifts, and there's always shifts that are occurring around us in a world that's dynamic, right? And so that's one reason why a part of that support team, would include a executive coach or a consultant, right? Part of your team. It could be us, it could be somebody else, but the whole goal would be to have people you can call upon for these issues you need to help you break out of the tunnel vision, right? People who can help you get out of that space.
And one, it could be maybe you don't understand what your competitor might be doing. You're so focused on this, or you might be nailing it in business, but the last thing you want to do is have your wife leave you all of a sudden.
Right.
It doesn't matter how much money you have from my standpoint. If I were to lose my wife, I'd be like, I failed. I failed the test if that were to happen as well too. And God would say, hey, if you deny me, you've missed that as well too. So it's, maintaining perspective is understanding, the 6 components that make for a very healthy leader.
Yeah, another one that comes to mind too, dimension to consider, I think is important, is a lot of CEOs, they don't have an adversarial relationship with their board, but they very much view their board as sort of a one-dimensional relationship, like a boss, which is not, it's while that is true, I think the board also gives you another space for resource around, think about an industry veteran who you trust and who you can get on your board and kind of be a mentor to yourself, right? That's another space to leverage an existing resource, right? Is the
You're
board.
Talking about a healthy board. I know lots and lots of unhealthy boards.
Plenty of unhealthy boards, right? But if you have the ability, hopefully, to influence the board situation, not only to improve its health, but to get on it, just consider a strategic way to get an actual mentor who's also then helping you from the board. That's another, just a whole other dimension in your leadership that can be really helpful.
Now, in terms of maintaining perspective, because when you hear someone say, I don't have perspective, or frequently they wouldn't say they don't have perspective, because if they had it, they would have it. But it's other people talking about a leader. This leader does not have perspective. How do you fix feedback? Because a lot of leaders will say, I hear this feedback, but it's not all true. So what do you do? Take that problem customer who just says, this business is the worst business in the world. Well, it's not the worst business in the world.
Yeah,
but what do you do with feedback, whether it's good or bad feedback? What do you do with that customer that just hates your company?
I think the first thing to remember is it's not always bad to fire a customer. So
Absolutely.
Sometimes you have to do that. Not that you should do that right away, but just put that on the table as an option, because if they're that unhappy, you might just want to benefit from ending it. But I think it's tricky, right? There's a reason they feel that way. There's a reason they've been treated that way. Or they've perceived their treatment. And so you have to dig into that as a leader, right? And be able to take the feedback. You have to hear it, and you have to say, I'm sorry, right? No excuses, right? Back to extreme ownership, right? Your job is to own that feedback. So if you haven't read Extreme Ownership, or you haven't seen our podcasts on that, go back and check those out. So you got to accept that accountability, but then you have to take it to the next step, and you have to go, like our last podcast on market shifts, and go see, is there something systemic in the way you're delivering your services, your customer service, your technology? Is there something systemic in the market that there's a need you're not meeting? Is there other customers who feel this way, right? And so you have to accept the feedback. You have to have pretty thick skin. This actually happened to me the other day. I was in a meeting with a CEO, and we had gotten some small thing wrong on a deck, which was fine. It was a mistake on our part, but it was the direct. If we'd just taken the direct feedback, it would have been pretty. it would have had a lot of implications for the project. But it was the other people on the team who were serving at the client understood why it was done that way, because it was not for an external facing, it was an internal facing document. And so they sort of they were not bothered by it, right? So we did not get too concerned about it, right? We took the CEO, I was delivering the message. CEO gave me the feedback. She wasn't very happy. And I was like, okay. And by the way, everything in me wanted to make excuses. Like everything inside here is going excuses. And I'm knowing
you're like, Josh, go listen to my
right.
episode.
That's what I am thinking about. I'm thinking about listen to your own episode. And I just changed I said, thank you. We'll get it fixed. And I'm just inside, just like dying, right? Because I hate that. But it is. You take the feedback, and then I'm reading the body language on the other people in the meeting. They're clearly not upset by it. They understood the context in which this occurred.
Oh, absolutely.
And as long as I have closer relationships with them in terms of this project, they were very satisfied. It was a small minor fix, easy to accept that, make the change and move on, versus feeling like it was going to be a fundamental shift to the project. So it's something you have to do in the moment, and then seek that other feedback for perspective.
One of the things that I love in terms of maintaining perspective, this is a really expensive tool, but if you have the resources, I love the what I call the interview 360. We all know the little bubble 360s that you do, which kind of work. If you've never used it in your business, the interview 360 is off the chart, because instead of like, tell me about Josh's leadership on a scale of 1 to 10, well, that doesn't do much. When I do an interview 360, I literally interview, let's say, 4 people that work with you, and I write down what they all say. And that's way different, because then they'll say, I love it when Josh talks to me and says specific things that I do well. However, sometimes he might look down on me if I don't get this one thing right. But that's way more helpful for you as a leader than on a scale of 1 to 10, you're a 9. Well, what in the world does a 9 mean?
What does a 9 mean? Yeah, exactly.
And that is the great thing about an interview 360. So that's, from my executive coaching, that is something that I do offer to clients, but it takes a while to do, because you have all these interviews.
Oh, sure.
And then there's a way that we give it to the client as well, too, instead of them just reading it. There's a way of doing it where it literally hits harder in a very encouraging way. Because as we all know, let's say you have I don't want to call a low-level customer service, they're not going to know as much about leadership because they're not in all the closed-door meetings.
Right.
So a lot of it's taking that into perspective to maintain perspective.
Well, and it's very similar approach to a product market fit exercise, because actually just did one of these recently with a large subsidiary company of a kind of a larger healthcare organization and technology group. And we basically went out and talked to several current customers. We went out and talked to several prospective customers, market personas, and it was a funny thing, because their product didn't really have clear fit. It was sort of either it was going to be a new disruptive product, or it didn't have a home. And once we delivered, and to your point, like documented all the notes from those conversations and had really good interview guide and did everything we could to like validate research wise in the market, we brought back and we said, here's your best path forward. Well, they divested the business. They saw it and they go, there's nothing here. Like, nothing substantial, right? So they actually took the whole subsidiary and just divested it, sold it to someone else almost instantly.
Because they understood perspective. And
they had to come get it. Like, this is the whole issue. These very detail-oriented, very time-consuming interviews. But yeah, sometimes that's the outcome.
And that does get into, granted, we're recording this at the very end of March, and this will probably come out end of April, early May. Understanding short-term and long-term goals as we maintain perspective. So I know hopefully all of the leaders who listen to our podcast has both short-term and long-term goals. But now that you listen to this sometime in the second quarter, that's vitally important in terms of maintaining perspective. So what do you do short-term, long-term goals? How frequently should you revisit those goals?
Yeah, it depends a lot on your business and your industry, right? So it depends on how fast the company is changing. I think some people, I've actually gotten to the point in my life where I write, I now have weekly, monthly, and annual goals, both for myself and for business. And I'll have all sorts of separate.
I'm the same way.
Separate dimensions that I use. Thanks to Dave Ramsey and Entree Leadership, I've got a whole 7 or 8 dimensions in which I then actually have gotten to the point where. So what happened was I started making annual goals, and then I realized, well, so this is like the long-term goals. Whatever's right for your business, you make these long-term goals, and you realize, wait a second, how am I going to know if I'm making any progress against these goals? So then I actually set up a monthly recurring email to myself with the goals and a question to myself, basically, to delay send. And so then I started doing that, and I thought, wait a second, how am I going to know if I'm making progress each month? So actually I do all the way down to the week. And so now I write myself, I have like weekly notes in every dimension, what I'm going to do, what I did do, and basically write myself a report every week.
And from a coaching perspective, I would encourage you, keep doing that. But also I would encourage you, if you were one of my clients, don't be too hard on yourself when you don't hit those goals.
Right. I have to be careful about that.
And we've talked about that. I love it when people don't hit goals, not because I don't like it when you hit your goals, but typically from a coaching perspective, the real goal is not, hey, Josh, you hit your goal. The goal from a coaching perspective is, hey, Josh, you missed your goals. Let's dial down into that, because typically that will give us an idea of, if we fix this one area because you didn't hit your goal, if we fix that and then do fix it, you are a much, much stronger leader long term. Because if all I do is just compliment you on all your goals, I'm not a coach, I'm just a cheerleader. And cheerleaders are important, really, really important.
Yeah, it's another part of your team.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you need a cheerleader and a coach. A coach understands, let's dive into that a little bit more.
Well, and also I think the other piece of that is if you know why you didn't hit a certain goal, there's many times goals are representative of something deeper that you're trying to achieve. And sometimes the goal itself you didn't achieve because you were actually achieving more important things in your life in terms of your values, right? Or shifts in the world around you, or you were asked to take on a different project you didn't see coming at the beginning of the year, which you did because that was more indicative of your values, which is okay, right? Those things happen. So there's also reasons why the goals don't get achieved, and for good reasons as they pertain to your values.
Absolutely. And, invest in technology if you need. So, for example, back to my first, when I got lost backpacking, guess what I have now?
GPS.
I have a GPS device.
I don't think they had those in 99.
They did not have them in 99, but now I love my new GPS device, because as soon as I'm like 15 meters off the trail, it'd be like, check your map, check your map, check your map. Now, the problem with that is...
So when you go to the bathroom, does it start beeping at you?
It's like, hey, I'm just trying to take one, please. But at least it lets me know, look at your map, you're off course.
Yeah.
We need to be able to look at our map frequently, because I don't mind if you go off course in business, but be intentional about going off course, because I'm going off course because I have to take one. I don't want to go off course because I think that's actually where the answer is.
Well, and that's, again, why you have a team, right? Is, hey, the map says here, but I'm going to go here. Does this make sense to you? I see a shortcut. I have to go this way. There's something in the way. And so your team, right, can give you that perspective to say, yep, good idea. No, that's a bad idea. So,
hey, so we've got to maintain perspective in business, maintain perspective in leadership. The third component of this, and this is next week's podcast, how does our Christian faith play into being a leader? Whether you lead or are in a secular company or a Christian company or a church, or you lead your household, or whatever that looks like. Or let's say you're a student. How does Christian faith come to perspective? Because as believers, we need to be very aware of that as well, too.
Right.
But in the meantime, hey, check us out on theconsultantandthecoach.com. If you listen to this on YouTube, ask us a question or two. We'd love to respond and say, hey, I love what you said, or hey, we missed that point. We should have thought of it in this way.
Yep. Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, until then, hit the subscribe button, and look forward to talking to you guys next week.
Take care.
Cheers.